Welcome to The Blitz, a podcast from 𝐁𝐥𝐬𝐿 Church. The Blitz is all about tackling tough topics head-on at full speed. Are you ready? Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good whatever time of the day it is that you happen to be checking out this podcast. My name is John. I will be your host today, once again, as always, on The Blitz. Hey, what's up, guys? We're kind of in a rhythm of doing this on a somewhat regular basis. I hope that that's helpful for you. I know I enjoy doing it, and hopefully today will be encouraging and challenging as I'm going to be talking about Jesus and beer. Now, the typical MO for the Blitz has been I'm kind of tackling controversial things head on, full speed. That's the tagline, right? And I wouldn't say that this is one of those necessarily super controversial things, but it is a thing that is that needs to be dealt with from time to time. And so I'm decided to go ahead. We're just going to put this on audio and stick it on the podcast. And maybe this is entirely unimportant to you, and that's fine. Or maybe it's challenging and helpful to you, and that's fine too. And I hope that it is. So we're going to talk about Jesus and beer, talking about the way Christians think about and relate to alcohol. And so we're going to be looking at some scriptures in the Old Testament and the New Testament, and I'm going to kind of lay out our general position as a church. And but before we do that, I want to share a little bit about my own story. So I grew up in a very conservative Baptist church and a Baptist family. So my dad and my mom did not grow up as believers. After they got married, they both had conversion experiences. They came to faith in Christ, and at that point, there was a very much a turning away from some of their habits that they had picked up. And one of those habits was drinking. And I don't mean like drunkenness. I just mean enjoying drinks, as well as enjoying tobacco. And I'll probably do a different podcast on tobacco because that's a different issue. But one of the things was they enjoyed alcohol. And so when they got saved, they stopped that cold turkey. And then I was then brought up in a church that was, I would say you're fairly typical conservative Baptist church. And, in our household, alcohol was wrong. Beer was wrong. It was a sin to drink, and that's just kind of the way it was, and that was normal for me growing up. And it wasn't until later when I started reading the scriptures that I came to the realization that that's not exactly the way that the scriptures present alcohol to us. It wasn't that this is a bad thing that you need to avoid and bad people do this, and when you do this, bad things happen. That isn't at all how the scriptures present alcohol to us. And so I think as we dive into this, it's important to make distinctions between traditions and maybe denominational positions on things and what the scriptures teach, right? So tradition isn't bad, and denominational positions on things are not bad, granted that they do not supersede what the scriptures teach. And so the tradition that I inherited was that alcohol is bad. But that's not what the scriptures say. The name of our church is 𝐁𝐥𝐬𝐿. That means all of life lived before the face of God. And part of what is central to that posture and to that idea of living 𝐁𝐥𝐬𝐿 is that the Word of God is what forms our thoughts about everything. So the at the end of the day, the question that I need to ask is not what do other people think about this, or what do other traditions think about this, or what is the background that I received from my parents growing up, who, by the way, changed their position. But it is what do the scriptures teach? How does the Bible talk about the issue of alcohol? And so obviously I'm not going to be exhaustive in this. I'm just going to give you some of the bigger the bigger moments in Scripture that shape the way we think about alcohol. Okay, so the first one is going to come from Deuteronomy chapter 14, verses 23 through 26. The context here is that God's people are gathering for a celebration, and they are bringing their their tithes before the Lord to have a huge feast. Okay, and it says this: and before the Lord your God. In the place that he will choose to make his name dwell there, you shall eat the tithe of your grain and of your wine and of your oil and the firstborn of your herd and flock, that you may learn to fear the Lord your God always. So this is a large party that's meant to honor God and to celebrate God, and it's supposed to be a celebration, okay? And they're supposed to travel to this. And then verse 24 says, if the way is too long for you, meaning you can't carry all your stuff to this place, right? If the way is too long for you so that you are not able to carry the tithe when the Lord your God blesses you because the place is too far from you, which the Lord your God chooses to set his name there. Again, you got to travel too far to bring all these things for the celebration. Then it gives us the instruction, verse 25, then you shall turn it into money, meaning sell it. And then bind up the money in your hand and go to the place that the Lord your God chooses. Okay, so now we've sold the goods, we've gotten the money, I can take the money with me. What do we do when we get to the place with the money? Verse 26, and spend the money for whatever you desire, oxen or sheep or wine or strong drink, whatever your appetite craves. And you shall eat there before the Lord your God and rejoice, you and your household. Okay, so again, the context is this is a celebration of the Lord. This is a feast. Lots of people are participating in this together. And if the place that this is going to occur is too far for them to carry all the goods, then sell the goods, take the money. When you get to the place, you're supposed to buy whatever you desire. This is supposed to be an extravagant party to celebrate the faithfulness and the goodness and the grace of God. And so when you get to the place where you're going to have the party, you buy the oxen, whatever you want. You buy the sheep, whatever you want. And then the scriptures specifically say wine or strong drink. And these are two different categories. Okay, wine would essentially be a fermented drink that is of a lower alcohol content. So this would be like what we would consider a beer. Okay, so I'm going to say that the wine is a lower alcohol content as opposed to the next thing, which is strong drink. A strong drink is an intoxicating drink. It's whiskey. Okay, it's something like whiskey. It's a distilled drink. So God is telling his people to go have a party and go celebrate his goodness to them. And this feast is supposed to be involving oxen and sheep and whatever kind of food you want, and wine or strong drink. Okay, this was a public celebration of God's people gathered together. This was not something that was done in private. This is something that would have happened publicly, and this was to involve all people. Rejoice, celebrate God, you and your household. Okay, so here we have God's instructions. If you want wine, that's great. You want strong drink, that's great. Whatever your appetite craves, get that and celebrate the Lord. Okay, there's one text. Another text would be Psalm 104, verses 13 through 15. It says, from your lofty abode, you water the mountains. So God, from his abode, waters the mountains. The earth is satisfied with the fruit of your work. You cause the grass to grow for the livestock and plants for man to cultivate, that he may bring forth food from the earth and wine to gladden the heart of man. Okay? This psalm is celebrating the gifts that God bestows upon his people. God bestows the gift of waters. Waters come down and satisfy the earth. Water comes down and crops grow. Crops grow up and they're harvested and they're turned into meals, right? God gives these things. He causes the grass to grow as a gift, right? He gives livestock as a gift. These things bring food to sustain man. And in verse 15, wine to gladden the heart of man. It's interesting, it doesn't say wine to provide the nutrition that's necessary. That's not that. It's wine to gladden the heart of man. Wine is a gift from God that does not just provide, hydration, but gladdens the heart. Okay, that's Psalm 104. Livestock is a gift. Grain and bread is a gift. Wine is a gift. All of these things gladden the hearts of men. A gift to be received with gratitude. Okay. The next text I want to look at is in the New Testament. It's John chapter 2, and this is where Jesus shows up to a party. It's a wedding feast, and they've run out of wine. And this would have been an incredibly embarrassing development for the host to not be prepared with enough wine for the people. And of course, in these days, the wedding wasn't like a 2 to 3 hour service with a party. This was something that went on for days, right? This was like a week-long celebration. And so the wine has run out, and Jesus is there, and his mother approaches him saying, "Hey, can we make some wine?" And then John proceeds to tell the story of Jesus making wine. So in verses 6 through 11, it says, "Now there were 6 stone water jars there for the Jewish rites of purification, each holding 20 to 30 gallons. So we've got 6 containers of 20 to 30 gallons. That means we're talking about 120 to 180 gallons of water at this point. And in verse 7, Jesus said to the servants, "Fill the jars with water," and they filled them up to the brim. And he said to them, "Now draw some out and take it to the master of the feast." So they took it. When the master of the feast tasted the water, now become wine, and did not know where it came from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew, the master of the feast called the bridegroom and said to him, "Everyone serves the good wine first, and when people have drunk freely, then the poor wine. But you have kept the good wine until now." So here Jesus is at a party. This is a celebration. They've run out of wine. This would have been a massive, a shameful thing to the host. And also it's just a bummer for the party. And Jesus then takes these containers that were for Jewish rites of purification, containing somewhere between 120 and 180 gallons of water, and he turns them into wine, and not just like, not boxed wine from Costco, but this is like the best wine. It's so good, right, that the host acknowledges that, hey, usually we serve the really good wine first. Okay, now there's a reason for that, because once you have a couple glasses of wine, the quality of the wine doesn't really stand out that much anymore. Your palate, you're losing it. Also, if you had a couple glasses of wine, you're not going to be able to discern what is really good wine and what is not wine. And so the master calls out, "This is the best wine. Like you brought out the best wine now." Okay, so this is what Jesus did. This was a miracle. Jesus intentionally did this. And then John closes the section by saying this, the first of his signs, meaning this is the first miracle of Jesus. It says the first of his signs Jesus did at Cana in Galilee and manifested his glory. It manifested his glory, and his disciples believed in him. So Jesus making the best wine at a celebration where the wine had run out, and making this wine after people have already had the wine that existed, John says this manifested the glory of Christ. This was the first of his signs, and it manifested the glory of Christ. Christ's kingdom is about bringing joy and life and restoration and celebration. This is what the kingdom is about. This reveals his glory. And of course, there was a mixed crowd at this wedding. We don't know how much they had, but they had certainly consumed everything that had already been provided. And Jesus didn't say, "Okay, let's cut it off now," but rather he makes this wine, and the goodness of the wine and the amount of the wine provided, it manifests his glory, and his disciples believed in him. Okay? So what we have here in the Old Testament text that I mentioned and this text is is wine is understood to be a gift that God gives to mankind, a gift that is given for our joy, and also a gift that manifests his glory, right? So this is a good thing. It is a gift, and in it, when it is received properly, it reveals the glory of God to us, okay? Add to that that when Jesus instituted communion, that he used wine for the sacrament of communion, meaning that this was a way that we were to remember him. We are to remember him through the bread and through the wine. So in these things we see, again, that alcohol is something to be received with thanksgiving, that the enjoyment of alcohol is not treated here as unwise or something that should be avoided or something that should be hidden, but rather it is to be enjoyed with brothers and sisters as they celebrate God's goodness. All right? It is to be enjoyed with brothers and sisters as they celebrate God's goodness. That is the posture towards alcohol in the scriptures. Now, the question that will always come up is like, well, what about drunkenness? And clearly, drunkenness is a problem. Some people want to argue that alcohol in the biblical times had such a low alcohol content that drunkenness wasn't a problem. That is just nonsense. When Noah made a vineyard and drank the wine, he got drunk and passed out in the tent. Okay, so yes, it contained alcohol. Again, that when Deuteronomy, when God gives instructions to his people to hold the feast, there is a distinction that is made between wine and strong drink. Whatever you think wine is, there is something that is stronger than that. I would suggest this is something like a whiskey. Okay, so the idea that the alcohol in biblical times didn't have, or that wine and these kinds of drinks in biblical times didn't have an alcohol content that was capable of getting you drunk is just, it's nonsense. That's not true. That's not the case. However, the Bible does clearly forbid drunkenness. Okay, one instance would be Ephesians chapter 5, verse 18, and do not get drunk with wine, for that is debauchery, but be filled with the Spirit. Okay, so people can get drunk. Wine can lead to drunkenness. And like I said, the wine in biblical times was capable of making you drunk. Strong drink is certainly capable of making you drunk. Any type of fermented drink is capable of making you drunk. Noah was an instance of that. And of course, the wedding where Jesus made the wine, that could have been another instance of it because people had already had their fill, and now more is coming out. Okay, so drunkenness is forbidden. However, we have to understand that there is a world of difference between enjoying alcohol responsibly and drunkenness, right? Enjoying alcohol responsibly is something that is blessed in the scriptures, and drunkenness is something that is forbidden in the scriptures, okay? The Bible warns against that. The Bible also warns us against things like sexual sin and lust and a variety of immoral sexual activities. But the Bible also celebrates sexuality as a gift that glorifies God and brings joy within the context of marriage. Now, we don't avoid the good of sexuality because it could potentially be harmful or sinful, right? That's not the way to respond to that issue. Rather, we grow as Christians in maturity so that we can enjoy God's gift in a way that glorifies him and is life-giving to us. And that's the posture that we ought to have towards the issue of alcohol. We want to grow in maturity so that we can enjoy God's gifts. Again, alcohol is a gift from God. We want to enjoy God's gifts in a way that glorifies him. Okay, so drunkenness does not glorify him, but enjoying it does glorify him. So we want to enjoy this in a way that glorifies him and is also life-giving to us. That's what the Bible calls us to. That's what the scriptures model for us. Maturity, self-control, enjoy the gift in a way that glorifies God, right? And is life-giving to you. Now, the question always comes up, understandably, that, okay, what about people who idolize alcohol or abuse alcohol? Or what about the person who has a conviction that does not allow them to personally enjoy alcohol? And the scriptures clearly deal with this as well in Romans chapter 14, verses 14 through 15 and 20 through 21. Paul says, I know and am persuaded in the Lord Jesus that nothing is unclean in itself. Okay, so that's important to understand. Nothing is unclean in itself. That would include all types of food and all types of drinks. Nothing is unclean in itself, but it is unclean for anyone who thinks it is unclean. So the issue here is conscience. Verse 15, for if your brother is grieved by what you eat, you are no longer walking in love, but by what you eat, do not destroy the one for whom Christ died. And then verse 20 and 21, do not for the sake of food destroy the work of God. Everything is indeed clean, but it is wrong for anyone to make another stumble by what he eats. It is good not to eat meat or drink wine or do anything that causes your brother to stumble, okay? The issue here is not that wine is bad. The issue in this text is doing something that causes your brother to stumble. Being offended by what you do is not causing your brother to stumble. Causing your brother to stumble would be causing your brother to do something that their conscience does not allow them to do, okay? So we know some people, for a variety of reasons, may need to abstain from alcohol. That was true in biblical times. Clearly, Romans demonstrates that. And it's also true today, right? There are some people who can't do it. There's some people who maybe have a conscience that doesn't allow them to do it. There may be people who have done this really poorly in the past, and it's just wise for them not to partake at all. And the Bible clearly instructs us not to enjoy a liberty that causes a brother to stumble. Not that just your brother thinks is wrong, but causes the brother to stumble, meaning that this would, in the issue of alcohol, it would essentially amount to enjoying alcohol in such a manner that leads a brother to drink against his conscience. The problem is not that the brother thinks he should not drink, but that it's leading the brother to drink against his conscience, okay? So the issue is not that wine or beer is wrong. And the issue is not that some people don't agree with drinking, that some people just choose not to drink, but the issue now is causing a brother to do something that their conscience clearly forbids, right? And that is a real issue, and that is something that we need to be sensitive to. I can tell you a story. Once I was hanging out with some guys, and we were playing some cards together, and the guys had brought a couple drinks, and so we sat down, and one of the guys who was at the table playing with us, I knew that he had previously had a problem with alcohol, meaning that he would drink irresponsibly and had abused it and got himself into some decent trouble with that. And so before I had my drink and before anybody got into the drinks, I privately invited him into the kitchen where we were at, and I said, hey, I know this, has been a problem in your past, and if this is going to be not good for you, then we'll just put this stuff away. It's not that important, okay? Loving you is more important. So if we need to do that, just let me know. Happy to do it. Won't make a big scene about it. Just tell me. And his response to me was this. He said, no, it's actually really good for me to see you guys drinking responsibly, because my whole life, I've never seen that. I've never seen people who can, in a self-controlled way, enjoy a drink and glorify God. I've never seen that. So this is really healthy for me to see it. I'm not going to participate in it because it's not wise for me, but I really appreciate, you guys being able to do this, and that's a really healthy thing for me, okay? And I think a lot of people are surprised at that, but this is legitimately what he said to me. And so there are times where you have to have those conversations. If you know somebody in the past has actually struggled with this, then yeah, you need to have a conversation. But that is much more of a case by case issue in terms of, when you're around people that you do need to be aware of that. But what I have run into more often than not is not people who have had a drinking problem, but people who are concerned about a potential person who had a drinking problem at some point, right? It's never really been this person has a particular issue, but it's more of there might be somebody who's here, and we want to be sensitive to that. And that's a little bit different than what Paul is talking about in Romans, okay? So where does this land in terms of like a church and what we do? Well, at our church, usually about 2 times a year, we have a men's night, and this is just a night for guys to hang out, good time to invite friends, just enjoying each other, lots of conversation, connecting, and we will tend to do that at a local brew pub. And brew pubs are different than bars. Bars are kind of the place that you go to get loaded. Local brew pubs are all about craft and quality. And that's not to say that people can't abuse at a local brew pub, but a public house by nature is not the same as a tavern, okay? So we host these nights at local brew pubs that have, quality craft brews. And on those nights, many guys in our church do the same thing that they would do if they were out with their buddies at a place like this. They enjoy a drink responsibly. And we have just never made an issue of that. This is what we do with our friends when we're out, and we don't have different rules when we are together and doing this. So guys enjoy a drink. They model responsible enjoyment of gifts that God gives. But we never do that in a way that is trying to persuade somebody to partake. In fact, we always make sure that there's a variety of drinks available wherever we're going, so that those who don't want to partake for whatever reason don't have to, and they can drink whatever it is that they want to drink, right? Because what we want to do is we want to learn to enjoy all of God's gifts in a way that glorifies God and brings joy to God's people. And we don't want to treat something that God says is a gift. We don't want to treat it one way in public and then a different way in private. We don't want to hide this and say, well, we don't want to do this when people are around, but we'll do it behind closed doors. Either alcohol is a gift to be enjoyed responsibly to the glory of God, or it's not. And so we want to model, we want to give examples of responsibly enjoying this gift that God provides. There probably aren't a ton of great examples in the world where men, specifically men, are enjoying God's gifts in a responsible way. And so we want to build a culture that thinks about these things in a biblical way and can acknowledge that this is a gift from God that we are going to enjoy with thanksgiving. We're going to do it responsibly. We're going to do it to the glory of God. And we're not going to pressure people who don't want to do that to partake in it, where there's no pressure to do that. But we're also not going to take a potential concern that an individual may have and then turn that into a policy. And so when those things come up, we need to talk through those on a case-by-case basis, and are happy to do that. But our general posture is, this is a gift, and God is glorified in it when we enjoy it responsibly, okay? So that's kind of where we're at. Now, I know there's a lot of questions, and none of these episodes are ever meant to be an exhaustive handling of a thing. I know that you may want more in-depth information, and I would just recommend a talk that was given by R.C. Sproul. You can just go search The Tyranny of the Weaker Brothers. And there's a fantastic, I think it's about a 50-minute talk that he gives. And he goes into depth in Romans chapter 14, he goes through the text and he walks us through what does it look like to obey that text. And he deals specifically with the issue of alcohol. And I think that you will find that to be very informative and challenging and hopefully encouraging. So if you want to do the deep dive, go ahead and check that out. The Tyranny of the Weaker Brother by R.C. Sproul. Okay. So I hope that this was helpful. I know that there's probably a bunch of questions you got. Go watch that video, go watch that lecture, come send an email, come talk to a pastor. Love to do that, but hope this was helpful and maybe it can point you or clarify a little bit of how we think about Jesus and beer here at Corndale Church. All right, take care.